WW3 Revolutionary Salute. Revolutionary Salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao of Revolution. We got a World War III alert. Putin sends his Doomsday fighter jets, his aircraft, to Iran. The aircraft is activated. But before we get into that, y'all be sure to wipe y'all feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform. Y'all, well, Trump is playing with everybody's life. Let's get right into the content. Salute.
This is WW3. You're looking here at unclassified footage that CENTCOM has put out of a unmanned surface vessel that conducted a strike against a naval maintenance facility hosting submarines and other vessels inside of Iran. Trump announcing that the blockade is back on in terms of Hormuz and that they are going to be the ones in control of everything. But when you look at the traffic of everything going through, it doesn't look like anything is picked back up to anywhere close to what it used to be or needs to be to get back on schedule. This looks like the whole area is pretty much a ghost town because everyone knows bombs are flying. No one wants to get caught up in the middle of the war. You got missiles, drones, mines in the water left and right. And you can see from the footage I just showed you, the U.S. military is conducting operations all over the place. And this is far from over. Some are saying the scenes look apocalyptic from the strikes. They said they hit them harder than ever with these most recent strikes. It looks like they're definitely targeting key military facilities in the southern part of Iran. And Iran retaliating. And in doing so, they have destroyed the hangar and most of the stuff that's sitting on the tarmac in Jordan at one of our main places. So Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, Jordan, they're all taking shots to the face here from Iran, and they're taking them pretty hard here. This thing is far from over with no talks on the table. This is going to stretch into something that lasts all throughout the summer, and by the end of the summer, when it all catches up, it's going to be too late. There's going to be nothing no one can do about anything at that point.
Gas prices finna go right back through the roof. Trump knew them fucked up, but the world tired of playing games with him. That's why they knocked off Lindsey Graham. He probably next.
Again, prices manipulated here. If you don't know, Trump keeping them that way, and when it all snaps back to reality, people got a rude awakening coming. Join me for the live streams Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern.
Air raid sirens have sounded across Bahrain as explosions were reported near one of the Gulf Kingdom's most important military installations, Sheikh Issa Air Base. The incident unfolded in southeastern Bahrain, where residents reported hearing blasts shortly after emergency warnings were activated. However, the exact cause of the explosions remains unclear. Officials have not confirmed whether the blasts were caused by incoming missiles or drones, or by air defense systems intercepting potential threats in the area. Sheikh Issa Air Base is a key military facility in Bahrain. The base hosts Bahraini Air Force operations and supports U.S. and coalition military activities in the region. Because of its strategic importance and its role in regional operations, the base has long been considered a potential target during periods of heightened tensions with Iran. The reported explosions come amid a major escalation between Iran and the United States across the Gulf. In recent days, Iran has launched waves of missiles and drones toward U.S.-linked positions and military facilities in Gulf countries, including Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, and the UAE. The attacks followed U.S. strikes on Iranian military targets, including missile systems, drone facilities, radar sites, and naval assets near the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has claimed responsibility for several retaliatory operations, warning that American bases and regional allies could face further attacks if strikes on Iran continue. The latest developments have placed Gulf states on high alert, with air defense systems activated across the region. Countries hosting U.S. forces have increased security measures as they prepare for possible missile and drone threats. So far, there have been no confirmed reports of major damage or casualties from the Bahrain incident. Authorities are continuing to assess whether the explosions were caused by successful strikes, intercepted threats, or falling debris from air defense operations. The incident highlights the growing risks of miscalculation as Iran and the U.S. remain locked in a cycle of retaliation. Beyond military concerns, the escalation is also raising fears about energy security, shipping routes, and the stability of the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most important oil transit routes. For now, Bahrain remains on alert as officials monitor the situation and investigate the source of the explosions near Sheikh Issa Air Base. With missiles, drones, and air defense systems active across the Gulf, every new incident carries the risk of pushing the region closer to a wider conflict.
While American bombs are still falling on Iran, Moscow just moved one of its most secretive aircraft onto the chessboard. Not a fighter jet, not a bomber, a flying command bunker, built to run a war or survive a nuclear one. As U.S. strikes hit dozens of Iranian targets, air defenses, radars, even boats in the Strait of Hormuz, a Russian Tupolev Tu-14PU quietly departed Vnukovo Airport outside Moscow and touched down at Imam Khomeini International in Tehran. Analysts are calling it Russia's version of America's Doomsday plane. The Tu-14PU isn't a VIP jet, it's a Punkt Upravlenia, literally a flying command post. It's operated by the Kremlin's elite Rossiya Special Flight Squadron, the same unit that flies Vladimir Putin. This variant is built for one job: keeping Russia's leadership in command during a national emergency, including a nuclear one. Encrypted satellite links, electromagnetic shielding to survive a blast, and a range of over 7,000 kilometers, enough to stay airborne and in control across multiple war theaters at once. So why send a nuclear crisis command jet to a country under active bombardment? Because fixed command centers, palaces, bunkers, ministries are exactly what gets targeted first in a war. A command post that can move and talk securely from the sky is much harder to hit and much harder to intercept. Its presence in Tehran suggests conversations happening far above the level of a normal diplomatic visit. Secure leadership-to-leadership coordination away from compromised phone lines and satellite intercepts. This isn't the first time this jet has shown up in Tehran. It made a similar trip back in February as the Russia-Iran Strategic Partnership Treaty was being finalized. But landing again now, in the middle of active US strikes, oil sanctions, and a Strait of Hormuz on edge, that timing is the message. Moscow isn't sending troops, it's sending its command and control brain, a signal that it's watching this war very, very closely and staying plugged in. Now, before this spirals into World War III headlines, there's no confirmed mutual defense pact obligating Russia to fight for Iran. No evidence of Russian troops deploying. What we know for certain is narrower: a hardened Russian command aircraft capable of coordinating a crisis from the air, sitting on the ground in a capital under attack. Whether that's quiet crisis diplomacy or a rehearsal for something bigger depends entirely on what happens next in this war.
Subscribe to One India and never miss an update.
Donald Trump is panicking as Iran refuses to surrender. Trump is flailing. He appears to be preparing U.S. special forces for a ground invasion of Iran, as Donald Trump's continuous bombing campaign of Iran is not working, and as Iran has responded very forcefully, attacking U.S. interests in the nearby Arab nations. If you take a look right here at the satellite image of the Oman port of Duqm. Look at the Duqm port in Oman. You can see the Special Forces mothership belonging to the United States right here. It's called the Ocean Trader. In many ways, it's hiding in plain sight. When we saw Iran strike Duqm port the other day in Oman, lots of people were wondering, well, why were they doing that? Isn't Oman one of the previous mediators? Why would they be striking Oman? Well, they seem to be striking at the area where the U.S. was positioning special forces for a potential invasion of Iran. Also, we've been covering here on the Midas Touch Network how the U.S. supercarriers, the Abraham Lincoln and the George H.W. Bush, have positioned themselves around 250 kilometers from the coast of Iran. Also, if you look at where the United States has been targeting in Iran and the types of radar, surveillance, and other infrastructure that the U.S. has been targeting, one would think that that could potentially be trying to prepare the terrain for a ground invasion if ultimately Donald Trump decides to go in that direction. And he certainly appears to be getting more and more desperate and more volatile by the day, which is saying something because he's a very desperate and volatile person. I also want to point out something that I don't think a lot of people are paying attention to as well. We're seeing a lot of top Russian officials flying to Iran right now. Some of the Russian airplanes that would normally be used by their top envoys are heading to Iran, as I think Russia is further preparing to help Iran in the event the United States does launch a ground invasion, as we've seen Ukraine continuing to strike deep within Russia with those FP-1, FP-2, and FP-5 drones. One of the things that informs us that Donald Trump is potentially preparing a ground invasion, in addition to the areas where he's striking, and it's been these continuous strikes, which again appear to be setting the stage for a potential ground invasion. You can see the desperation of Donald Trump's other strikes grow when he's not striking the kind of coastline, radar, surveillance, other weapons that kind of guard the coast. The United States almost had a direct hit of the Bushehr nuclear power plant. Take a look at this before and after right here of the Bushehr nuclear power plant, and U.S. bombs came dangerously close to blowing it up the other night.
Yeah.
And so you take a look at the satellite image. If there would have been a direct hit, and I mean, we're talking just a few kilometers away from being a direct hit, there would have been a massive radiological disaster right there. And just look at look how close it was right there. Also, if you look at the type of locations the United States is hitting, in addition to the Bushehr nuclear plant, we also see that the United States hit Iran's largest petrochemical hub in the Masher, Khuzestan province. That's Iran's main oil region. A water pumping statement in Mashhar in southwestern Iran was struck by airstrikes by the U.S., killing 1 and injuring 4, per the deputy governor there. And then the U.S. launched those other strikes around the coast. And this desperation that we're seeing is also tied up with the strategic petroleum reserves. I know I sounded like a broken record for the past 2 weeks, but this is precisely what I thought was going to happen as the strategic petroleum reserves now hit a level that would be deemed to be the estimated minimum operating level. Remember when I showed you this chart that Eric Nuttall posted? When did he post this? July 8th. The U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve is now 19 million barrels away as of July 8th from the estimated minimum operating levels. There very soon will no longer be a safety buffer to protect the world from further losses out of the strait, because that strategic petroleum reserve feeds into the entire global oil market. And that's one of the ways that the Trump regime has tried to bring down the price of crude. It hasn't brought down really the price at the pump, because the refinery price is a different price than the crude. Remember, I talked about the crack splits. The other way that the Trump regime is trying to manipulate the price of crude, it's through these short positions that I believe Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has been organizing with a lot of the kind of billionaires that he's been working with. I mean, take a look at this graph that HFI Research posted. They call it Insane Asylum. And they write, "I know I'm not a normal person, but I know I'm not crazy. What we are witnessing in the oil market today is history in the making. We have never had Brent short positioning this high and global crude oil inventories this low." So unless there was this massive market manipulation, why in the world would there be such a massive effort to do these shorts when it's so obvious that the Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed and war is escalating, and we've never had a situation where the strategic reserves have been this low in history? But when you see that CENTCOM continues to post messages and says the Strait of Hormuz is open, all of these ships are going out, everything is amazing, and then you see these short positions, you see, in my mind, Treasury Secretary Bessent, the position of CENTCOM, Brad Cooper, and Howard Lutnick. Their fingerprints, to me, are all over this now. One of the other aspects that, to me, informs that a ground invasion may be imminent as well is right now the CENTCOM commander is a guy named Brad Cooper. Brad Cooper's mentor, a former CENTCOM commander, is a guy named retired General Frank McKenzie. Now, he was on the various regime media programs this morning. He was on Face the Nation on CBS. As you know, CBS has become regime media as well. And he was endorsing the invasion. And so to me, it wasn't just that he was there randomly saying that. CBS is state regime media that's used for floating these types of plans. And this was a test bubble for the ground invasion. You've got the special forces ready to go. You've got the 2 carriers right there. If you look at where the military is striking on the coast that they've been doing every day. Again, they're taking out the kind of radar systems to allow for the invasion a la D-Day. Like that's what they're doing, except unlike D-Day, right now, and again, there was massive casualties on D-Day, but right now, this is going to be sending our troops and our special forces into a meat grinder, and there's just going to be mass death if this is what they end up doing. But here is the current CENTCOM's mentor, Frank McKenzie, retired general. This guy's the former commander of CENTCOM. Here's what he had to say.
I was just looking back at my last conversation on Face the Nation with Lindsey Graham, and the senator said, if this deal fails, President Trump is going to take the Strait of Hormuz over by force. The U.S. will control the Strait of Hormuz. That was 3 weeks ago. How does the United States end up controlling the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, Margaret, we certainly have the capability to control the Strait of Hormuz if the president chooses to follow that course of action. Look, what he's been trying to do is get to a diplomatic and a political solution here, which I applaud, and I think we should all want to see as the final end state. Nonetheless, the fact of the matter is the Iranians generally only respond to military force and to extreme pressure. Look, we're not talking about regime change here. What we're talking about is modifying the views and actions of an extreme hardline regime. That is possible. We have the capability to do that. That capability is resident in the U.S. military, should the president elect to employ it. That would include opening the Strait of Hormuz, maintaining the Strait of Hormuz open, and in fact, seizing Karg Island, should we elect to do that. And I would just say as an aside, that's something we should think about doing, because possession of Iranian soil would be a significant factor in future negotiations with Iran. So all those options are on the table. I'm not sure where we're going to go with this, but I do know we have these capabilities.
Now, as Donald Trump continues to panic, I mean, he's posting some of the most deranged things while all of this is taking place. I mean, let me show you the scenes of the war. We could just run the B-roll, folks. Here's smoke rising in Manama, Bahrain after Iran's strikes. Several missiles launched from Iran right here into various areas. Iran launched a large-scale surprise attack on Kuwait earlier with 3 ballistic missiles directly impacting the U.S. ATACMS ground-to-ground missiles in Kuwait. More strikes by Iran. Take a look over here. Iran was able to hit numerous other, U.S. military sites in the region as well. Iran's IRGC announced full destruction of fuel tanks and Patriot air defense systems at the U.S. Ali Al Salam Air Base in Kuwait, and an FPS strategic radar system at the Ahmed Al Jabar Air Base in Kuwait in the 3rd phase of its response last night. Iran's IRGC announced the destruction of helicopter maintenance and repair centers at a P-8 electronic warfare aircraft hangar and the command and control center of the U.S. military drone fleet at the U.S. Sheikh Issa Air Base in Bahrain. I'll play this one for you. Iranian armed forces launching their kamikaze drones at U.S. bases in the region. Let's play this one right here. And then you've seen previously some of the photos of the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain, what that looks like after Iran was able to strike there. But here's what Donald Trump is posting while all of this is going down. He's posting this photo of Lindsey Graham. It's a photo of Lindsey Graham, who, as you know, died 48 hours ago or so. Lindsey Graham is wearing a hat in this photo that says, "Make Iran Great Again," and he's holding Donald Trump's Wikipedia page with a hat that says "Make Iran Great Again." Donald Trump is posting that he has a 59% approval rating. His approval rating's in the 30s right now. And then Trump says prices are coming down along with lowering of oil and gas. By the way, even with all those short positions that I talked about, and even with the manipulation from the strategic reserve, and our strategic reserve has now hit functional tank bottom, we're at the emergency level. The prices are going up right now for crude, up 5%, 7% over last night, and they continue to go up. As you know, gas prices, the price that you pay at the pump is going up. Donald Trump posting these weird images of fighter jets and of the Qatari Air Force One surrounded by fighter jets as he fears that Iran is going to kill him. And then, while he's posting that, I mean, you have these images of war, the massive plume of smoke rising from Keshem Island near the Strait of Hormuz following the U.S. airstrike there. That may be one of the areas that the U.S. is looking to invade. Large explosion reported after a U.S. airstrike in Sirak the other night. And so, we'll keep you posted every step of the way, of course. But that's where we're at right now. We're covering this from every angle, giving you the data, giving you the facts. Hit subscribe. Let us know what you think. Let's get to 7 million subscribers. Thanks for watching. Want to stay plugged in? Is having a meltdown this morning, and he is giving more fatal directives that will certainly backfire in his face, but unfortunately also backfire in the face of everybody in the world. Donald Trump is posting that the United States will essentially now serve as mercenaries and take over the Strait of Hormuz and charge everyone a fee to transit equal to 20% of their cargo. The pirate doctrine, as it's being called. This is what Donald Trump just posted moments ago. The Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed right now, by the way. We've only seen a few tankers associated with Iran leave, but Donald Trump says the blockade is now on. The oil market right now is just an utter disaster. It's going well past $80 a barrel very soon, and the economy is really getting crushed by this. Here's what Donald Trump posted. The Hormuz Strait is open and will remain open with or without Iran. We are reinstating the Iranian blockade, so named because it is only stopping Iran's ships or customers from entering or leaving. All other countries will have fair and open use of the strait. The USA will be, from this point forward, known as the guardian of the Hormuz Strait, and he puts that in caps. That's what the U.S. will be known as, Donald Trump says, the guardian of Hormuz. What are you making, some made-for-DVD movie? This is real life. What the hell is this? He goes on to say, but as such, and as a matter of fairness, we will be reimbursed at the rate of 20% on all cargo shipped for any and all costs necessary to do the job of providing safety and security to this very volatile section of the world. The process and formation will begin immediately. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And then he posts that the U.S. is now involved in what he refers to as a punitive expedition in Iran. He reposts that Donald Trump's action against Iran is already the third most successful punitive expedition in U.S. history, only exceeded by Jefferson's takedown of the Barbary pirates and his own capture of Maduro. If Trump eliminates enriched uranium, it easily jumps to first place. The hell are you talking about? The third punitive expedition? Americans just want to be able to afford groceries. Americans just want to be able to afford homes and have health care. Americans don't want to be dragged into your third punitive expedition. What the hell is this? The economy is crashing right now. Oil prices are surging right now. People can't afford anything. And this is what he's posting. Iran isn't backing down. Donald Trump doesn't control the Strait of Hormuz. If you look at the shipping data, we've been posting it. Reuters has also confirmed it. The number of oil tankers crossing the Strait of Hormuz yesterday fell to its lowest level in 2 months. As I've been repeatedly saying, We are on the verge. Now it's a matter of days, not weeks, of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve hitting a level that will trigger an emergency and a global catastrophe because there won't be crude in the strategic reserves at all. Just take a look at the shipping data. The ships aren't leaving. He's just making all of this up. Why do we have a deranged psychopath there who's now saying he's going to extort every ship 20%? And so here's the statement from the IRGC Public Relations in response. The only way to reopen the Strait of Hormuz to vessel traffic is for the aggressive U.S. military to end its intervention in the strait and respect the sovereignty of countries over their own coastal waters. The continuation of these interventions will lead to even greater disruption, affecting the global oil and gas sector. As I've always said, Donald Trump is never capable of doing a deal. He hasn't done deals his entire life. He's always broken deals, committed fraud, and then used the idea of negotiation and deal to lure people into good faith discussions where he sucker punches you in the back. So then Donald Trump went on state regime media Fox, and I guess he was supposed to talk about Lindsey Graham. Instead, he was talking about being the guardian of the strait. We're going to keep it. We'll be the guardian. We'll be reimbursed. We're going to get paid. We're going to be so rich. No, we're not going to be doing any of those things. What are you talking about? And nobody wants this. Here, play this clip.
We hit them very hard last night. Every time they send a drone, we hit them very hard. But we had a deal. What nobody knows, we had a deal. It was a done deal. And then they broke it. They always break it. We've had 10 deals with these people. And so we're just going to hit them very hard. And we're going to keep the strait, and we'll probably run it. We'll become the guardian of the strait. Maybe we'll call it the guardian angel of the strait. And we should be reimbursed for that. When we do that, we're going to be reimbursed because the other nations are very wealthy. They're on our side. And we can't be expected to do that for nothing, unlike we had for many years. You know, we guarded the strait for 50 years more, and we never got paid for it. They made all the money, and the United States was just, they wouldn't. It's amazing. We guarded it for nothing. And now we're going to guard it, and we're going to get paid for guarding it, a lot of money. But we just want to be reimbursed for doing all of this, for putting our people in danger. But we're really not putting people, we're really saving people.
When I say nobody wants it, I mean, I guess Netanyahu wants it. I guess the neocon war hawks want this. But the American people don't want to be dragged into this thing. Then you have these state regime media hosts in their propaganda ways. They're like, so Donald, it does seem like Iran's back at it again, wanting to now try to once again control the strait. What are you going to do there, Donald? And then he makes up this bizarre false story about how Iran wanted to negotiate again. You know, yesterday there was an 11 hours. They always like 11 hours. And then we had a deal, and then they came back after 11 hours. And then they were like, no, these people are crazy. Since March, Iran has been very consistent. Okay, say what you want to say. They've been very clear that they will not give up control over the Strait of Hormuz and will fight to the death over it. They've made that point clear. They made all their other points clear. While you've been saying, they're the greatest, I hate them, they're the greatest, there's a deal, there's not a deal, there's a deal, I'm going to blow up their civilization, I'm not going to blow up their civilization. Here's what he just said on state regime media moments ago. Let's play it.
It looks like they're back at their business trying to take over the strait. What's your response?
Well, we're taking over the strait. They have nothing. They've got nothing. So something that nobody knows, yesterday they had an 11-hour meeting. Everything's 11 hours with these guys. You know, you can't settle a one sentence in 1 hour and 1 minute. It should be 1 minute. And everything was agreed to yesterday. And they leave the room and they call back and they say, we had to make a couple of changes. I said, changes? They got to make changes? We're not going to make changes. Always changes. They just, they're professional negotiators. That's all they are. I don't even call them good at it. They haven't gotten anything. They got nothing from me.
Let's face it. After a night with drinks, I don't bounce back the next day like I used to. I have to make a choice. I can either have a great night or a great next day. That is until I found
Obama was on the Iranian side. He went to their side because, he is and it seems like Donald Trump is going to say that Obama went to their side because Trump was going to say Obama's a Muslim, and then he went to their side, or Obama is like an Iranian and went to their side. This is what the psychotic, demented president of the United States is saying right now about a former president who was actually successfully able to do a deal that got rid of Iran's nuclear program. But because Donald Trump is such a feeble, pathetic loser, he has to rip up anything that has to do with Obama, and then gets us in this never-ending war where now he says that we're the guardians of the freaking strait. What the hell are you talking about, you loser? Here's what he says about Obama. Play this clip.
Obama was the worst of all because Obama actually went to their side. Obama, because, you know, he's well, let's not say, let's leave that for another time. He was terrible. And he allowed Iran to, but he gave them 1.7 billion in cash, in green cash, put in satchels in an airplane and brought to Iran. $1.7 billion. Do you know what that is? Did you ever see $1 million in cash? This is 1.7 billion. It took up an entire Boeing 757, and they flew it to Tehran and they gave it to people that were waiting at a plane. Can you imagine?
And so as Donald Trump now escalates the war in Iran, and as I noted earlier, a ground invasion looks more and more imminent. More and more, it looks like this escalation is going to result in a wider scale war. We're already seeing it regionally. The Trump regime is pushing through their Defense Department, which they call their Department of War, a new recruiting effort called Send Me, Send Me, Send Me, Send Me. And they say in this video, even when the mission is vague, Americans have always been saying, send me, I want to go to war. Okay, that's coming from Donald Trump, a 5-time draft dodger who claimed bone spurs, who says that our veterans are suckers and losers. Pay attention to the propaganda they're putting out. They're saying, send me, whether the mission's vague, we will die for America. We will die for Trump. That's what they're saying here. Here, show this clip.
Throughout our storied history, when soldiers said, send me, well-equipped or poorly equipped, it didn't matter whether they were stepping into a clear mission or a vague one, whether there were clear skies or raining, it was always a determined reply. Every one of them, just like you, were called to serve something greater than themselves. Send me.
And at the same time they're putting out those videos, one of the biggest neocons, Marco Rubio, is putting out videos right now, and he put out an op-ed and a video, why we're dismantling the international criminal courts. And he says it's now the job of the United States to dismantle and obliterate the ICC because the ICC prosecutes war criminals. And this is a video that Rubio released this morning. And he says it's one of the biggest threats facing the American people right now. He says it's the International Criminal Court. Why? Because they are further getting ready to escalate their war crimes. They've already committed war crimes over and over again. They've already aided and abetted genocide. That's why they're now saying, we're attacking the ICC. Send me. We'll attack the ICC. Do you see what's happening this morning? Here, play this clip.
Of our shared way of life. But today, powerful people in faraway places want to take that away from us. They believe that they should be in charge of your laws, of your country, your life, and they don't care whether or not you agree. Halfway across the world, there's an institution that calls itself the International Criminal Court. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't. But chances are you don't know the names of its judges, of its prosecutors, or its president. And you shouldn't have to. But as we speak, the ICC and its friends are waging a war against our country, not with bullets or missiles, but with statutes, compacts, and the force of so-called international law. When the ICC was born 24 years ago, they told us that it was merely a narrow backstop, a global court that would step in to prosecute only the gravest offenses, things like genocide and war crimes, and only when a nation's courts were unable to prosecute them on their own. But the truth is, it was something far more radical and extreme. It was a global tribunal staffed by unelected globalist bureaucrats who claim their power is almost unlimited.
Meanwhile, Iran's not backing down. As noted before, Iran's IRGC spokesperson has been saying things like this: we will not under any circumstances allow the United States to interfere in the management of the Strait of Hormuz. Not now, not ever. Also, Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson said the angel of death is just. This is regarding Lindsey Graham. For such an individual whose entire life's legacy was malice and support for aggression, nothing but a dark record will remain in the minds of people. The death of this hot-headed and sharp-tongued senator will certainly not grieve the heart of any free person. Now, as I noted, already this war is expanding regionally in ways that were very, very predictable. An Iranian plane was supposed to land in the airport in Yemen, and it was blocked by Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia controls the kind of official Yemenis government. Iran backs the Houthi government, and there's this kind of division of power, this kind of civil war, if you will, that's been going on in Yemen. You know, Saudi Arabia controls a group. Then there's Iran that, supports the Houthis. Let me show you what it looked like as Saudi Arabia bombed the airport as this plane was about to land. Let me show you what happened over here. Let's play this clip.
في هذه اللحظات مشاهدينا الكرام كما تشاهدون غارات يومية عدوانية على مطار صنعاء الدولي إلى حد الآن بغارتين استهدفت مدرج الهبوط والإقلاع هنا كما تشاهدون. الآن غارات عدوانية متواصلة. شاهد. شوفوا. أربع غارات.
Now, I do want to focus briefly on domestic issues for a moment. I'll, of course,
A plane lands in Tehran. No missiles, no warheads, just a plane. But this is not an Iranian plane. This is not even a passenger jet in the ordinary sense, viewers. This is Russia's Doomsday aircraft, the Tupolev Tu-214PU. And when this plane touches down in a war zone, Moscow is telling the entire world something. I am Nikita Kapoor, and today we break down why Vladimir Putin just parked a flying nuclear command post in the middle of America's war with Tehran inside Iran. First, understand what this aircraft actually is. The Tu-214PU is not built to carry diplomats to a summit. It is built to survive the end of the world. Hardened communications, encrypted satellite links, electromagnetic shielding designed specifically to keep functioning even through a nuclear blast. This is the aircraft the Kremlin uses to run a war from the sky when the ground is no longer safe. Its nickname in defense circles, the Doomsday plane. And it flew deliberately, openly from Moscow's Vnukovo Airport straight into Imam Khomeini International Airport in Tehran. Now, here is why the timing matters, viewers. This is a region already on fire. The United States and Israel have been at war with Iran. It began with strikes that killed Iran's supreme leader. It has since dragged in Lebanon, the Gulf states, even Turkey, where NATO air defenses shot down an Iranian missile mid-flight. So there was a ceasefire, if you remember. It did not hold. By July, the truce has collapsed entirely. The US has carried out fresh rounds of strikes, this week alone hitting more than 100 Iranian targets. Iran has responded by attacking commercial ships and choking the Strait of Hormuz and launching missiles at the Gulf nation. So the Hormuz is also a hostage right now. So Gulf states are on the edge. Sirens have been sounded in Bahrain and Kuwait. Oil markets are watching every headline very closely, and into this chaos enter Moscow with a doomsday plane. Because Russia and Iran are no longer just convenient partners, viewers. They are bound by a strategic pact signed last year, by billions in trade that dodges Western sanctions, and by a battlefield partnership. Iranian drones for Russia's war in Ukraine, Russian military technology flowing back to Tehran, which is at war with the United States. So when the Kremlin sends its Doomsday Command aircraft into a war zone capital, the message is not subtle. It is that Iran is not alone. A plane lands quietly, a message is sent loudly. And in the world's most dangerous neighborhood right now, that is exactly how the great powers are choosing to speak, are choosing to communicate with Doomsday plane. I am Nikita Kapoor. We will keep tracking this so you don't have to.
So that was the attack of Iran. I mean, quite an intense wave, to be fair, coming from Iran, which really shows the level of escalation. Of course, the messages that they're sending here to Trump and game over USA, a hand being chopped if they try and occupy their islands. So where are things going from here, and what is the United States going to do about these Iranian responses? Well, there are chances that the United States is trying to control the tempo of an unavoidable, perhaps, war of attrition. So let's say they don't want the reality of the Strait of Hormuz being where it belongs, in the hands of Iran. They want to have attacks on a lower pace, lower scale, and they would be able to control when and how with an off-ramp always, so that they don't attract bigger responses coming from Iran. And they're slowly targeting radar systems here and there, air defenses here and there. Iran, of course, is responding as well, and they're causing a lot of damage, significant damage to the United States. But the United States is doing that to avoid something potentially bigger. All right, how long can this last? Well, this is not an ideal situation for both countries. It's not ideal for Iran, it's not ideal for the United States. However, it's as if both countries are waiting to see who escalates further, in a way. From the Iranian side, we're saying that the last attack that they had, this one in particular, is probably the biggest, largest so far. The type of missiles used, again, these are the missiles that were landing in Tel Aviv and destroying the genocide state bases. We're talking about 1-ton warheads, some of them up to 1.5 tons or 2-ton warheads. And they cause a lot of substantial damage, which isn't ideal for the United States. But Trump isn't clearly interested in having any serious deal, and he wants the situation to go back to where it was before. One thing that doesn't help is the fact that the Gulf states, the Arab Gulf states, establishments, are still taking a pro-American position in all of this, and the American president feels like, well, I have the backing of some of the regional governments. They're even trying to apply pressure on Oman. That's why Oman slightly started to change its position. Donald Trump said that we will bomb them. He threatened them. He threatened to bomb them completely. So it doesn't help that some of these countries aren't learning the lessons. The fact that the United States isn't able to protect them, that they're there causing problems, regardless of what these countries think. And Iran, on the other hand, is almost entirely on its own, doing all of this to protect its dignity, to protect its sovereignty, to protect its people, to protect the free people who are opposing this US-Israeli aggression that's happening. One thing that would change the course of this exchange between Iran and the United States is Israel. So if Netanyahu, who is supposed to be meeting Donald Trump, it still didn't happen yet, if he decides to go on a certain attack or convince the American president to have certain strikes against more valuable Iranian infrastructure, without him being included even, that would lead to a very big retaliation from Iran. But if Netanyahu participates with attacks from the Israeli side because usually Israel goes for the targets that it really wants to hit from the beginning. They tried to convince Donald Trump to attack the energy infrastructure much more heavily before. They didn't, because the United States knew the impact that it would have against it. This time, it could work. Because we've established, the whole world understands by now that the United States and Israel do not care if they lead to the global economy going into ruins and destroying the lives of people and increasing financial burdens globally. Their European counterparts are like poodles for Donald Trump, but are like very few who don't really care about what they do and don't do, and whether it leads to a global disaster and potentially a depression. Now, Trump has been stating recently that he doesn't want to be that president who would lead to a depression. However, the movements and the aggression of the United States is leading just there. Iran is now closing the strait. Both countries are confirming that the MOU is in essence dead. What's left after this? What's left is an escalation where both countries would even show more force up until the other side gives more concessions.
With the Iran war between the United States / Israel and Iran, and that is he will very politely take over control of the Strait of Hormuz. Now, before we show you that, let's bring on our guest today, who's going to have a response for that from Tehran, who is back with us, Professor Marandi, professor at the Tehran University and former advisor to Iran's nuclear negotiating team and combat veteran from the Iraq War. Always important, I think, to put all those credentials in there. Professor, listen, I know one of the big, we're going to talk today, there's really kind of the two biggest issues in getting this thing solved, even more than the nuclear stuff, is control of the Strait of Hormuz. How's that going to work out? And the issue in Lebanon, because that's point 1 and point 5 of the strait. Now, it turns out President Trump this morning is probably going to have a great relief to Tehran. They're going to really enjoy this one. He's going to take over control of the strait himself.
Well, we're taking over the strait. They have nothing. They've got nothing. So something that nobody knows, yesterday they had an 11-hour meeting. Everything's 11 hours with these guys. You know, you can't settle a one sentence in 1 hour and 1 minute. And everything was agreed to yesterday. And they leave the room. They call back and they say, we had to make a couple of changes. I said, changes? They got to make changes? We're not going to make changes. Always changes. They just, they're professional negotiators. That's all they are. I don't even call them good at it. They haven't gotten anything. They got nothing from me. We hit them very hard last night, but we had a deal. What nobody knows, we had a deal. It was a done deal. And then they broke it. They always break it. We've had 10 deals with these people, and we're gonna keep the strait, and we'll probably run it. We'll become the guardian of the strait, and we should be reimbursed for that. When we do that, we're going to be reimbursed because the other nations are very wealthy. They're on our side.
The guardian angel of the strait is what he subsequently called himself. So obviously that's a big help for you. So he said a lot of things there. Let's take them. But what about this whole issue? First of all, even before the strait part, that there was a deal that had been done yesterday after 11 hours. And then those darn Iranians went back in and launched a missile at a ship. What do you say?
Well, he's had many of these deals over the past few months, and he's always saying how the Iranians come to him and they express remorse or they are begging for a deal. But somehow during the past 4 or 5 months, we haven't had any pictures of him with any of these Iranians or between his people and the Iranians. So that will remain a mystery, I suppose, for the rest of my life. But I think obviously he expects the Iranians to be very happy that he will be taking over the Strait of Hormuz. It's a heavy burden for the Iranian people, so I'm sure that's something that he relishes. But it's not going to happen. The Iranians have shown their military capabilities during the 40 days of war, where the Americans and Israelis launched an illegal act of aggression against Iran, murdering children, murdering the leaders. And they outlasted the Americans in siege warfare, leading the global economy close to a cliff. And I think the MOU, which was signed, and many in Iran actually criticize the negotiators and say that they didn't get enough. But in the West and in the United States in particular, I think it was, and across the world, I think it was widely seen as a symbol of Trump's defeat in the war. So now Trump is undermining the deal. He's violating almost every single element within the deal. He has not released Iranian assets. The stolen assets are still being kept by the Americans in violation of the deal. The Israeli regime has not been forced to leave Lebanon or end the killing and the bombing. That's a violation. He has reversed the sanctions relief on Iranian oil exports, another violation. And he has also struck Iranian targets multiple times. He's expanded the sanctions regime. All of these are violations. And in addition to all that, he's created a corridor in the Strait of Hormuz that is a violation of Article 5 of the deal, because the Iranians are supposed to be in charge of the corridor during the period when the MOU is valid. And there's the very small issue of constantly threatening Iranian leaders and the Iranian people with death and destruction. That is a violation of the deal. So he's been busy violating all the elements of the deal. And that is why the Iranians are going to be very tough at the Strait of Hormuz. And I don't think that Trump is going to have the sort of success he seeks.
And if you know, from the position of negotiations themselves, what is your understanding of how this is impacting on the Iranian negotiating team, whether it's Ghalibaf, whether it's Arakchi, or anyone else in there, when they hear President Trump make these statements that we had an 11-hour meeting, and at least according to Western press yesterday, over this weekend, actually, there were no meetings in Qatar. I think it was on Friday, President Trump said, yeah, we're going to have a meeting on Friday. And the claim was by unnamed Western officials was that the Iranians had privately communicated to President Trump that they made a mistake. They shouldn't have attacked that ship, the Singaporean flagship. They want to try to make it right now. And so the claim was on Friday that on Saturday, there was going to be a meeting in Qatar, and that coming out of that, the Iranian side would admit that, yes, there will be no restrictions of any kind on the Strait of Hormuz for the remainder of the 60 days. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I think, again, this goes back to so many different things that Trump has said over the last few months that all turned out to be just fabrications. And this is just another one of them. I mean, in Iran, at the beginning of the war, if you recall, this was also being, this narrative was also being promoted, that it's not clear who the leader is and who's in charge, and that sort of nonsense. And again, this is something that he seems to be promoting. Whereas it's the guards, the IRGC, or the army, or the police, or anyone else for that matter, they have no ability to work autonomously. They cannot just go and strike ships or attack a target in another outside of Iranian territorial waters or outside beyond Iran's borders without the authorization of the state and without the authorization of the Supreme National Security Council. And the Supreme National Security Council ultimately has to get approval from the leader. So the IRGC, it doesn't just go and shoot ships. The Iranians were, over the last few days, more than a few days, they were warning ships not to go through the American corridor. They were warning the Americans not to do this. They had, I think, before this, hit ships with drones, not heavy drones, but as warnings to prevent this from happening. So ultimately, by striking this ship and then subsequently other ships, I think it was clearly in line with their policies that were being pursued beforehand. The Iranians know that the Americans have been violating all of these different elements of the MOU, as I pointed out. And what the Americans also wanted to do was to undermine Iran's authority over the Strait of Hormuz in order to take away Iran's leverage. And so if the Americans had succeeded, if Trump had succeeded in taking away Iran's leverage in the Strait of Hormuz, and then refrained from carrying out his obligations, then he would effectively have the upper hand. And that's why the Iranians are not going to allow him to have the Strait of Hormuz, and they're more than willing to go back to war and all-out war in order to make sure that he does not have control over the Strait. So what happened over the past few days is in line with Iranian policy, and it's clear why they did this. They know that Trump is trying to undermine Iran, and he has undermined the MOU. And the Iranian negotiators know that there is no option but to make sure that the corridor remains firmly in the hands of the Iranians.
But here's what is puzzling to me, because you can wordsmith from the American side. You can wordsmith things all day long. You can have the Central Command claim that the Strait of Hormuz is open and traffic is flowing, that President Trump is going to take over the Strait of, et cetera. That you violated the MOU, not us. We didn't violate the MOU in paragraph 5, et cetera. You can say all that. But when you claim that on top of all that, that the Iranians were engaged in 11-hour negotiations that apparently they weren't, that didn't even exist, and that they agreed 10 times to an agreement, and then but they never did, then where does that leave the Iranian negotiating team? Because if you're watching all that and you're like, that's total fiction, none of that stuff even happened, then upon what basis do you actually meet sometime, whether in Qatar or Turkey or anywhere else, and say, all right, well, let's have a negotiation? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but you would still prefer, the Iranian side would still prefer to get the unfrozen assets relief, would prefer to get the sanctions relief reimposed, et cetera, and would like to get to a point to where this whole 60-day period ends in something, so that you can get to even talking about an end of war term with the negotiations. It seems like that's what you would want, but how do you get there in this environment?
Absolutely. I mean, if Trump had just carried out his obligations and the ones that I explained a few minutes ago, instead of violating all of them, the Iranians would have been obliged to normalize the flow of ships by the end of the first month. And so right now, as we speak, the number of ships that would be traveling through the Strait of Hormuz would be gradually increasing. And then by the end of the first month, it would return to what it was before the war began. And a lot of the economic ills that the world is about to experience as a result of these shortages, and it's not just crude oil, as you know better than I, it is all of the petrochemical products and the helium and the fertilizers and all that are missing from the oil market, and the shortage is accumulating. So he's basically shot himself in the foot, and I think it's for two reasons. One is probably personal, his ego, his hubris, arrogance, and the second is most probably, I'm quite sure that it's the Israeli regime, the Zionist lobby, the same forces that brought Joe Kent to put his to resign, and the same forces that kept you out of power. But that's another story, I suppose.
So let's take a look at where that leads now. Actually, before I get there, back to your negotiating team. When they see all this stuff and when they read all this stuff about meetings that allegedly didn't happen, how do they then go to the next meeting? Will they go to the next meeting if there is one requested, an actual meeting?
No. The Iranians have said that they're not going to negotiate anymore with Americans until Trump changes his policy and implements the MOU. Now, to be fair, Trump isn't the first U.S. president who violates his commitments. All of the different experiences that the Iranians have had with U.S. leaders post-revolution have been bad. And the United States has always violated its commitments. The most important and the most famous of them all, of course, is the nuclear deal, the JCPOA. And Obama, as soon as the deal was signed, he began violating it. And the violations grew and grew until Trump became president. And then Trump, of course, ultimately tore up the deal. But so this is not unique. But Trump is, I think, he takes this as a big step further, in that he simply cannot be trusted at all. He'll just lie. He'll make up stories. He'll fabricate events. He'll say anything. He'll change it 2 hours later, and he'll be able to get away with it. His base will ignore it. The Western media, when it comes to Iran, they won't be that critical of him because of their hatred and contempt for Iran. So they'll sort of go with it, although they may criticize him for miscalculations, but they won't condemn him for the war of aggression, or they won't condemn him for the killings of Iranians or anything like that.
But
the only thing really that
it sounds to me like
one final point.
Sure,
The only thing that, because I should have responded to your question sooner, the only thing that is important for the Iranians, because of what you asked earlier, is results. In other words, a handshake doesn't mean anything. Promises don't mean anything when it's the Americans. The only thing that the Iranians seek are results on the ground. If it was the Brazilian president and he promised something, the Iranians would say, well, the Brazilian president promised, so we'll believe him. If it was the Chinese president who promised, or the Russian president who promised, or the Malaysian prime minister who promised, the Iranians would probably say, fine, okay, since you made that promise, we'll do as you say. But in the case of the United States, and in particular Trump, the only thing that matters for the Iranians are actions.
And so, if I'm understanding correctly, this is a pretty major point that you're making right here. If I'm understanding correctly, and you tell me where I'm off in here, unless the sanctions are again withdrawn, unless the frozen assets are put into place, and unless, and we'll talk about this in detail in just a second, unless the Israelis withdraw from Lebanon, there won't be any negotiations from the Iranian side. Is that accurate?
That's right. They have to take real steps to have all of these implemented, not just promises or meaningless movement. They have to see the facts on the ground change. And since the United States under Trump is violating all of their commitments except for one, and the only reason why they're not reimposing a siege is because of the potential economic crisis that would ensue, because the 4 months of energy shortages that the world has confronted has not been resolved. The shortages still exist. And it took us 4 months to get to where Trump claimed the United States was 4 weeks away from finishing its energy supplies. So we must be more or less 4 weeks away. So if there's another war, if there is conflict, if there's all-out war, then we'll get to that cliff, not just the United States, but the world, much sooner than 4 months. It'll probably take 4 weeks, or give or take a week or two. So for the Iranians, the only thing that now matters is for the United States to act, to implement the MOU. The Iranians aren't naive. They knew from the beginning that Trump had no intent of implementing the deal, and that the United States under Trump no one thought that they just hand over Iran's money and that they would tell the Israelis to leave Lebanon, or else we'll stop supplying you with funding and weapons. No one believed that. But the Iranians believed that the MOU did have its benefits because, first of all, because of the lifting of the siege, Iran was able to export huge quantities of oil literally during the first 3-4 days after the siege was lifted, because there were many tankers in the Persian Gulf and in the region that couldn't leave because of the siege, and they were full. So the Iranians immediately began exporting all that fuel and also importing key supplies and necessary products that were necessary for the 90+ million population of the country. So the Iranians did benefit from the MOU by being able to do that trade and earn money. But they knew that the United States would refrain from implementing the deal, and that is why they made sure that they had leverage in the deal. The Iranians have 2 types of leverage in the deal. One is, of course, the nuclear program. They divided the MOU, it's not a deal, but the agreement, into 2 parts. The second, if the first part bears fruit and it is fulfilled after all of the two sides carry out their obligations after 60 days, the 2 sides then come to an agreement on the nuclear program and on comprehensive sanctions. So one is the nuclear program. Right now, the Iranians are not going to negotiate the nuclear program because the first part of the agreement has not been implemented. So that is leverage. Trump wants a nuclear deal. Iran won't give it to him until he does all these things that he refrains from doing. But the second element is much more important, in my opinion, and that is the Strait of Hormuz. So if the United States does not carry out its side of the bargain, then the Iranians say that, well, we don't have to carry out our side of the bargain either. And they'll limit the number of ships that pass through the strait in order to react to Trump's policies. And that is why Trump has been trying to undermine Iran's authority in the strait.
Now let's take a look at that, because there's the words, there's the claims on 2 sides, and then there's the reality on the ground. Let's take a look. First of all, the Iranian side, the Persian Gulf Waterway Management Authority over the weekend said the passage through the Hormuz is currently not possible. Basically, it's closed. U.S. Central Command says, yeah, no, that's not true. Yesterday, they said the traffic is flowing. It's wide open. Then nobody gets to control it except the United States. But then this morning, we look and we see from the Hormuz report that CENTCOM insists that Iran does not control the strait, but shipping data tells a different story. Fewer than 5 merchant vessels completed the transit, the lowest in 5 weeks, all via Iran's northern route. The U.S.-backed Omani corridor has been completely abandoned, despite the presence of 2 aircraft carriers in the region. Now, that issue about the aircraft carriers coming in was allegedly supposed to put more pressure on Iran and to make them back down. Now, there have been 3 rounds of these tit-for-tats here since, I think, the 7th of July, and there was supposed to be a message to Iran that if you attack any of these ships going through the southern corridor, there's going to be a price to pay. But Iran keeps shooting back their own price and then never stops controlling traffic in that Omani corridor. Is that going to change, or will they continue to have control of it?
No, Iran will definitely continue to have control. The Article 5 is clear that Iran will manage the strait and normalize the traffic through the strait over these 2 months, not the United States. And the Iranians opened the corridor and told ships to register so that they could pass through. And the number of ships were increasing. But Trump, by imposing this corridor and putting enormous pressure on Oman as well, what he's trying to do is basically to take away Iran's control of.
And I'm sorry, Professor, let me interrupt you because this is literally breaking news. 9 minutes ago, President Trump just released this. The Strait of Hormuz is open and will remain open, again, agreeing with CENTCOM, with or without Iran. We are reinstating the Iranian blockade. So he's now saying that that's going to be, so now basically the whole thing's shut. Iran said that the strait was closed except for their authorization, and now Trump has reinstated the strait of the blockade. Let's see, the rest of it. He said the USA will be, from this point forward, known as the guardian of Hormuz Strait, but as such, as a matter of fairness, will be reimbursed at the rate, whatever. That's a bunch of nonsense. What do you make of this? The blockade is back on you now. So what is that going to mean for Iran?
Well, that shows that Iran was very smart in when it signed the MOU to quickly export all of that oil and to import and export its needs as swiftly as possible so that it can prepare itself for the coming weeks and months. And of course, this is going to be very bad for the global markets because the oil shortages that you discuss in your shows with experts are in very bad shape. And I don't think that the last 3-4 weeks have been able to improve the situation. Maybe they've been able to tread water for the last 3-4 weeks, but the reserves for the energy reserves have not increased. And other commodities that come from the Persian Gulf, they have actually, their shortages have increased because disproportionately over the last 3 weeks or so, it's been tankers that have been trying to go through the strait. And so other products have not been able to pass through as much as tankers. So while it comes to global energy supplies, the situation may have not gotten worse during the last 3 weeks or so, or 4 weeks. I don't know exactly how long it's been. But other commodities, their shortages have increased. So now, with the blockade on the Strait of Hormuz, then we can assume that the shortages will continue to grow. And we recall that when Trump was attacked for accepting the MOU, he said that he doesn't want to be a Herbert Hoover, and he does not want to preside over a Great Depression, and that U.S. energy supplies or their strategic reserves will be diminished or depleted in 4 weeks. So we are, I would assume, somewhere around the same place where we were when the agreement was signed.
And that's not going to be good for anybody. But, it's not going to be good for our side because the global economy, but especially the American economy and our SPR, we'll get to that. And let me talk about that in just a second. But before I get to that, the presumption is probably from the president's side, I'm going to put this blockade back on Iran to put pressure back on them to show them a thing or two. One of the things that I found was interesting, and I'd like your expert opinion on it. We spoke with 2 Western reporters over the last few days during the funeral procession for the assassinated supreme leader, that they said, hey, listen, we have discovered through talking with people and seeing in Iran that they're like 98% self-sufficiently with food, with water. They have their own internal petroleum capability to have diesel and jet fuel and whatever else to run their economy, et cetera. They're losing from the ability to export things and to get revenue from oil by large measure going out through the Persian Gulf. But they said they told me that when they were traveling through along with this group, that they saw the grocery store still had food in them, that there were not riots anywhere, and that the people were still, they were harmed, but it was more like inconvenienced. Is that true? Does the Iranian side have the ability to sustain a long-term blockade and still be self-sufficient?
Well, since Iran has been facing maximum pressure sanctions for many, many years, the country has moved towards self-sufficiency. And most of the country's products are made at home. And agriculturally speaking, Iran is almost self-sufficient, not quite, but almost. And this year we've had a better rain than the last 3-4 years where we had a drought. And also Iran has 15 neighbors. We have Pakistan, we have Afghanistan, we have Turkmenistan, then we have the Caspian Sea, which links us to Kazakhstan and Russia. We have the Republic of Azerbaijan, Armenia, Turkey, and Iraq. And then we have the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, and the Indian Ocean, and the countries on the other side of the Persian Gulf. So it's, they can't shut all of Iran's borders. And Iran produces most of what it needs. It is difficult. There's no doubt about it. Inflation is high, but as I said, Iran has been able to export and import a lot during the past 3-4 weeks, whereas the global energy markets have not. I believe they have not improved. Maybe it has not deteriorated any further. But it hasn't improved. And if we accept Trump's statement that they're 4 weeks away from depleted supplies, oil supplies, then they are in trouble. But there's also another element to this, and that is the funerals themselves. I don't know what your guest said about the funerals, but the funerals were unique. I don't in human history, I don't think we've had such gatherings. In Tehran, up to 15 million people participated. It took me hours to get there. I participated, but like some of my family members couldn't go, those who had little children or those who were old, because it was just so difficult. 35 degrees Celsius. When I got there, I had to walk for hours, and then it took 2 hours at least for me to get home. I slept after that out of exhaustion, and the crowds were stunning, and they were carrying flags. I didn't carry a flag; it was just too much for me. I'm too old for that. But the dedication of the people and the outpouring of emotions was unbelievable. And then the funeral went to the holy city of Qom, where millions gathered there. Then it went to Iraq. Many millions went to the two holy cities of Najaf and Karbala. And then finally, in his resting place in the holy city of Mashhad, you saw, I don't know how many millions of people just went into the city from surrounding provinces, but it was beyond belief. So you have this enormous support and very deeply felt support and anger towards the United States. So you have an armed forces that was basically able to hold its own against the superpower and its allies and proxies for 40 days. It was able to survive siege warfare, and ultimately Trump accepted the MOU, and now they've been able to export oil, import their needs, bring tens of millions of people to the streets, rebuild their damaged military installations. I don't see how Trump can defeat Iran.
You know, it's interesting, Professor. You mentioned it a second ago. I think Gary was able to scurry it up here. When President Trump signed the MOU on the 17th of June, he took a lot of heat from some of his warlusters here on this side of the Atlantic, who didn't want any kind of a deal. They said, no, let's just keep the pressure on. And when explaining why he did, he said this.
If we keep bombing, those ships won't be going. And you're talking about $500, $600, $700 million a day. It's a lot of money. A lot of money. That's why the world is okay. It's liquid. It's fine. Also, we run out of reserves in about 4 weeks. You know, there are reserves all over the world, and we would really run out. And there'll be a time when you wouldn't be able to get it. And you want to see bedlam? If we keep bombing, those ships won't be going. And you're talking about.
Okay, that's it was rolling there. That's what he said on June 17th. He recognized that there was an issue here, and you mentioned subsequently he talked about the potential for being Hoover and being the president over a depression, because we had been talking about that for months, that was the risk that we'd taken with this blockade, this dual blockades, that was the risk. And it's like, okay, well, maybe we dodged a bullet. Maybe we'll only get a recession, because that seemed to be already baked in even by the time we agreed to that. Well, now he's gone back to it. Who cares about whether anybody pays for this mythical control of the Strait of Hormuz? It'll never materialize, because we physically don't have the capacity to do what he said in that Truth Social he just posted a few minutes ago. But what is very real is that now we've reinstated all of that problem. So either we're going to restart getting rid of our strategic petroleum reserves and other stocks, or the price of oil is going to go up and there's going to be insufficient supply. What does this do to Tehran, in addition to everything you just mentioned, talking about all the people are behind the government, that they have the ability to be self-sufficient to endure a long-term blockade? Where is Iran right now based on this statement?
Iran has no option but to resist. And you know, at the moment, you have this brewing crisis between Saudi Arabia and Yemen, because a civilian airliner from Iran, which was flying to the capital of Yemen, Sana'a, today, just hours ago, as you know, was about to land when the Saudis bombed the airport, the international airport. And Yemen has said that they're going to retaliate. So you have a potential crisis brewing between Saudi Arabia and Yemen. And then the Americans want to block the Strait of Hormuz. And during the past few days, while the Americans have been bombing Iran, the Iranians have also been bombing U.S. Across the Persian Gulf region and in Jordan. And one of the things that the Iranians have been focusing on is electronic warfare capabilities, radar systems. So it's going to be much more difficult for the Americans to try to use electronic warfare to get a ship or two out of the Strait of Hormuz than it was before, because the Iranians have destroyed it. So now that they want to impose the siege, the Iranians will, of course, impose a siege. And that means that nothing will be going from the Strait of Hormuz. The global economic crisis will get worse much faster, because we've already been 4 months into this crisis. We had a 2-3 week period where it perhaps didn't get much worse, but now we are starting from where we left off, which is very close to the economic cliff. And in addition to that, you have this added crisis in Yemen.
And I was also told by somebody who has some context with Ansar Islam, the Houthis as they're called in the West, that they are considering and coordinating with the Iranian side that if things get to a certain level of worse, especially as it relates to Gaza, that they may play the Bab al-Mandab card, actually. And the Houthis may say, yeah, we'll add that on top of the Strait of Hormuz. What would happen if we get to that point, do you think?
Yes, I spoke actually to a relatively high-ranking Yemeni official, and he said that, and he spoke about Lebanon and as well as Gaza. So if the United States pushes the situation in that direction, and then you also have to add the resistance in Iraq, then we will be going to where we were, a very dark place for the global economy, and very swiftly. Again, it took us 4 months to get to where Trump was when he made that statement. It wasn't like 2 weeks; it was 4 months. It was a war, and then siege warfare, and then finally the deal. So now we're already there, and we don't have much further to go. And then if you add Yemen to it, I think it's just this could potentially bring about a situation where everything changes for everyone on this planet. Because if the global economy collapses, and especially at a time when the global economy isn't doing well at all, and there are all these imbalances, and people have already been saying that it is moving in a very dangerous direction. Then I think that we're going to see instability. We're going to see perhaps tens, if not hundreds of millions of people across the world potentially moving, depending on how bad it gets. If it becomes a depression, then you can envisage mass movements of people. I mean, if there's no fertilizer, if there's a collapse in trade, it's something that you don't want to think about. It's beyond my ability to envisage.
And let me ask you an opinion here. You've obviously you have some conversations with a lot of the negotiators and diplomats there in Tehran. To what extent are there conversations with other nations? And I'm talking about even the GCC nations, much less some of these other nations that would be directly affected in a negative way by the continuation of this blockade. What you said earlier in this program is that the Iranian side, if the MOU that we signed on June 17th would just be applied, then by the 30th day, there would have been something close to a resumption of at least full traffic based on what it was, based on the traffic, so that the oil would be flowing. But now then, because the United States added a southern corridor, which was not even part of the MOU, and we've decided to start using attacks, and we've gone back and forth. Now here, this blockade. To what extent do other countries around the world say, okay, I'm blaming Iran, or I'm actually blaming the United States here, because Iran is saying they would open the gates. Only the United States is saying, no, it has to be open on our terms or no terms. How is that being received as far as you know?
That's a really good question. So far, the world has been on Iran's side. Even though Western media is extraordinarily hostile towards Iran and will always present Iran in a very caricaturish way, sort of like these, cartoon villain. But and one of the reasons is because the United States carried out this war of aggression and murdered the leader, and all that, and all these kids and so on. But another reason is Trump himself. Trump is so unpopular across the world, and he's seen as so erratic and so aggressive, the trade wars and so on, that it's almost impossible for me to envisage the world sympathizing with Trump. And even though if anyone looks at the MOU, they'll know that Iran is right and that Trump is wrong. Western media has that capability of misinforming people and making people believe that night is day and day is night often. But in the case of Trump, it becomes very difficult, and I don't think he's going to succeed. And it would have been very smart of Trump to actually carry out the MOU, because if he did, and it was Iran that was holding back for whatever reason, he could easily blame Iran. But he did the exact opposite.
Yeah, and it's hard to even imagine from a Western perspective, but he's actually putting Iran in the role of the rational actor. And somebody said, no, we're willing to do this stuff. We've agreed to this. We'll do it. And we were doing it until you stopped it. That's just one of the more shocking things that I can see. But we are where we are. Well, listen, if that's where we ended, this would be a really troubling development based on President Trump's Truth Social there. But that's not the only one. There's another one. And point number one, that's point number 5 we've been talking about. Point number 1 above that, and you tell me if there was a reason why it was number 1, because it seems that to the Iranian side, that's even more important than the Strait of Hormuz. And that is the issue of territorial integrity and sovereignty of Lebanon. That was part of the requirement. President Trump said, I call the shots. I'm going to tell Israel what to do. They're going to withdraw. But then here, I just found this video yesterday. It was actually from 9 July. So about 4 days ago, here's what the Israeli Defense Minister, Israel Katz, has to say about this status.
בסיבוב הזה, אני אמרתי, כן, יש הרבה בתקשורת הרגילה שאוהבים, מה הוא מאיים ומה הוא אומר. אין דבר שאיימתי בו ולא מומש. ויש תכלית לאמירות האלה. זה המסר שאתה משדר לכוחותיך, אתה משדר לאויבים, ואתה מממש את הדברים האלה. ואנחנו בלבנון, בעצם אמרתי, דרום לבנון תהפך לעזה. אנחנו נפעל לפי המודל של רפיח, אנחנו נשמיד שם את הכל, אנחנו נטפל בהם בדרך הזאת, וזה מה שעשינו.
Wow. I mean, to just say out loud, now he's saying it in Hebrew, but obviously the internet now carries things everywhere. He's just saying, yeah, we're going to turn Lebanon into Gaza and make it the Rafah plan, which means they're going to turn it into a moonscape. How does that square with Iran saying that we want to have the end of this war based on that?
There will be no agreement with the United States unless Article 1 is fulfilled. I mean, all of the articles have to be fulfilled, but Article 1 included. So either the Strait of Hormuz remains as it is, or in very limited in its ability for people to carry out trade, or the United States forces the Israeli regime to leave Lebanon. And the atrocities that they are carrying out in Lebanon are clear to everyone, and they admit it themselves. They say it with pride, how they slaughter people, how they destroy the villages, how they wipe out, they steal the trees, they burn the forest. It's just unbelievable what they do. It's a repeat of, as he himself admits, or says with pride, it's a repeat of Gaza. And in the West, Western media is indifferent. Western governments are indifferent. You don't see European parliaments or MPs screaming about the need to sanction Israel or anything like that. Instead, just today we heard that the British Parliament, I think, declared the Iranian Revolutionary Guards as a terrorist organization. So while there's an ongoing genocide in Gaza, Iran's armed forces are declared a terrorist organization. That's how it works in the West. So Iran knows that unless in this world where the law of the jungle has been imposed, the only way to make sure that the people of Lebanon survive this ordeal is if the Iranians are steadfast and make sure that the United States will never be able to gain control over the Strait of Hormuz, and that the only way for the United States to be able to bring normality back to the global economy is through forcing the Israeli regime to end these atrocities in Lebanon.
And since Gary brought that up here, let me ask you about this. This is the news being reported today that former Iranian President Ahmadinejad had met with Mossad chief under an Israeli plan to install him as an Iranian leader. One claim I saw this morning said that Ahmadinejad had been placed under house arrest pending an investigation. What can you tell us about whether this is true or not?
I don't think any of this is true. I mean, why would if this was true, then the New York Times has basically signed his death warrant. Why would the New York Times or any other mainstream media outlet give the names of informants or spies or collaborators with foreign intelligence agencies? Whenever the Iranians capture a spy, always Western media would call that person a victim, an innocent person, a tourist, a teacher. I mean, Iran literally never arrests spies. They're always, according to Western media, they're always arresting innocent people. And then now they go out of their way to say, look, the former president of Iran who was seen in the funeral, he is one of ours. It doesn't make sense.
Well, and plus, correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to remember President Ahmadinejad was viewed as the possibly the Antichrist when he was in because of his hostility to the West. I'm not sure why that Antichrist would suddenly turn on his own people. So it doesn't seem very plausible to me, I'll just say. But that's just the state of things today. One last thing I want to talk to you about before we let you go is President Trump released this Truth Social on the 10th of July, saying that 1,000 missiles are locked and loaded and aimed the Islamic Republic of Iran, with thousands more to immediately follow should the Iranian government act on its threat pronounced in many corners of the globe to assassinate or attempt to assassinate the president of the United States of America. That's what he said on the 10th. And then here, this was just yesterday, Moshe Rezai, who is one of the senior advisors to the Supreme Leader on Military Affairs, says that the issue of revenge is a serious and actionable matter. Revenge is part of the path of the revolution. If leader assassination becomes routine, no country will have security left. The path of revenge will be pursued. The Strait of Hormuz is more important, but let's stick on that last part. The path of revenge will be pursued should President Trump be worried.
Well, let me divide this into, let's say, 3 parts. One is that in the funerals, people were calling for revenge. It was a repeated slogan wherever you went, and they were very angry. And this sense of justice, the need for justice is very clear. They said our leader was murdered, our children were murdered, our neighbors were murdered, our infrastructure was damaged and destroyed, and those who carried out these atrocities have to be punished. So that is a popular demand, and it puts a lot of pressure on the government and state institutions. The second is that the Iranians have seen that the United States, over the years, they've invaded country after country. They've destroyed Iraq, they've destroyed Afghanistan, they destroyed Libya. They crushed Syria and installed Al-Qaeda. They crushed Venezuela and taken the president hostage, and the list goes on, Cuba and so on. And if you go further back, Vietnam. Every time they destroy, and then they just walk away with no repercussions. And they can debate about whether this was a bad policy decision, but no one goes to jail for carrying out crimes against humanity. And this is what ordinary people in Iran are demanding. They're saying, look, this is one war where the Americans should not be allowed to just walk away. They have to pay a price. And so that is the argument. Now, the leaders in Iran have not said anything about the state being directly involved. They've just said that, yes, that's justice. There must be justice, and there will be justice. But they never said that there's going to be some organization or some part of the armed forces or intelligence services that are going to be instructed to carry out such operations. That doesn't exist, and in previous occasions that did not exist either. But one final thing that I do think is interesting is the Trump response and the Trump reaction. In my opinion, he's only encouraging people who would like to see war between Iran and the United States to actually assassinate him. He's already had 2 assassination attempts when he was running for presidency. We never figured out and never heard who was behind it, what was this real story. And by making such statements, he's creating an incentive for perhaps those very same people to carry out a 3rd attack on him.
And I'm sorry, let me go back to here, because based on what you said, I think on the second of the things that you said here, here is Rezai, who's saying the path of revenge will be pursued. Now, if it's not the government doing it, if there's not this secret cabal, then what does that mean? Because then it sounds like there won't be any. It'll just be words. So what does he mean?
Well, first of all, they've said that those who deserve punishment, the list is long. And so it's not just Trump, it's all of those who were involved in the decision-making process and pulling the trigger and killing all those kids at the Minab school and so on. So it's not just Trump. But I think basically what they're saying is that, there are people out there who feel that justice is necessary and they're going to do it. Doesn't mean that the Iranian government will, or the state will, have anything to do with it. But basically what they're saying is that there are people out there who I can't claim to know what they mean. What I'm saying is that there are people out there who will possibly pursue justice on their own and say that the kids in Minab, they deserve to get revenge, or their families deserve to get revenge. The people of Iran, or the people of Lebanon, or the people of Yemen, the people of Palestine, and so on.
And let me ask you a question here, because we're not just talking about this, the last 4 or 5 months or whatever since February, but to what extent is it on the front of the people's minds in Iran when you're going back to President Trump's assassination of Qasem Soleimani, of the destruction by Israel of the embassy compound in, I think it was 2024, and then in the 2025 war, where there was, as I recall, and you can correct me if I'm misremembering here, where there was a lot of assassinations of senior scientists and generals, where missiles went into apartment buildings and took out whole families, in addition to the person here in Tehran. So all kinds of things like that, in addition to this one, which also in addition to the supreme leader and his granddaughter and some other family members, apparently like 40 some odd people that Netanyahu last week bragged about assassinating. Is it all together like that, or is this just now part of the background noise, and that's just the way world works today, and they're worried about this current stuff?
No, it's all together. In fact, when I go out on the streets, sometimes some people know me because I'm in media, and they stop me and say, if we had been tougher with them after General Soleimani's murder, they wouldn't have dared done this. If we had been tougher with them when they did so-and-so, they wouldn't have done this to us. And often during the funeral ceremony, I mean, there are many millions of people, like many millions of people, so big that even Western media couldn't deny it, because in the past they'd say it's AI or they just downplay it, but it was beyond belief. But I walked for many kilometers in the funeral, and then I walked back the same route, and it was packed. And many people stopped me. I can't say how many, maybe 200, like every couple of minutes or so. People would stop me, maybe one person, maybe a group of people, saying, "We want revenge. This is not enough." Most people are not satisfied with the MOU. I mean, not that they are necessarily against the negotiators, but they're unhappy about how it's implemented. I don't know what the percentage is of those who believe that we should, because there are those who say that there are lots of people who say we shouldn't have negotiated, we shouldn't have signed the deal, we should have gone on with the war. There are lots of people who are saying we should be tougher, like the deal is okay, but we should be much tougher in enforcing the deal. But if you combine these two arguments together, I think that's the strong majority of Iranians.
It's interesting, Gary, showing these pictures here. You say that it's hard to downplay the pictures. The CBS News, I remember seeing one particular one where in the I think it was Karbala or Najaf in Iraq, said, quote, thousands of people support the funeral procession. Thousands, not hundreds of thousands, not millions. It was alleged 3.8 million, but so we are trying with that. Listen, one last thing that we got here. One of the things that was really stood out to me from some of my colleagues who were part of these processions themselves, covering it for Western media, Suleiman Ahmed being the most important one. He said the thing that maybe stood out to him more than anything else, along the lines you're saying there, is that they're saying the people that he talked to, they want to solve this problem once and for all. They don't want just some negotiated settlement that then we could go back 6 months from now, a year from now, whatever, and restart the thing. And they said, even if it costs half of our population to die, we're willing to do it. If we end up with 45 million people left in the country and we solve this problem with Israel and the United States, then that'll be worth it. That is a really strong statement. Can you assess whether that is hyperbole or just somebody he talked to, or is it accurate?
Well, I don't know about numbers and that sort of thing, but yes, no doubt. I mean, the Iranians have been suffering at the hands of the United States since 1953, since the coup against the government of Dr. Mossadegh. And then they had 25 years of police state, the Pahlavi rule. And then when there was a revolution, the United States was supporting the Shah on a particularly brutal and dark day called Black Friday, where lots of people were murdered in Tehran on the streets by the army. The next day, Jimmy Carter called and gave his support for the Shah. And then after the revolution, the U.S. supported separatist groups and terrorist organizations. And then, of encouraged Saddam to invade the country. And it's been a dark history from the beginning. There's a very good book, I may have said this on your show before, called Going to Tehran by Flint and Hilary Mann Leverett. And I think Americans should read the book. And they talk about the history of Iran in the United States in a much more objective manner than other Western writers. And they deal with many of the myths. And actually, they were saying when they wrote the book that if the United States doesn't move to change its policy, we're going to move towards conflict. And it turned out that their fears turned out to be quite valid. So the Iranians experiencing many years of maximum pressure sanctions, 2 wars in a year, and siege warfare. Obviously, the sentiment in Tehran would not be that far away from what your esteemed guest said. The Iranians say, we have to end it, bring an end to this oppressive state of affairs.
So as I see it, based on all the foregoing that we've talked about in this entire show here, Iran, if the Strait of Hormuz is not, if the MOU is not executed according to the terms that we signed, and especially the Strait of Hormuz being open and no southern corridor, no President Trump trying to run it, the situation with the frozen funds, with the sanctions being released, and Lebanon being evacuated by the Iranians, by the Israelis, there's not going to be any kind of a deal, no matter what President Trump does. If he goes back to full-scale war, if he causes all this trouble, that is the requirement now. So if we are in a situation right now, if President Trump doesn't do all those things, then the economic catastrophe is almost certainly going to start unfolding, because I don't see any chance that Iran is going to be compelled to do the things that Trump says. Do you see it any differently?
I agree completely. The only thing that I can imagine is that Trump speaks to his imaginary Iranian leaders, and then he goes back and implements the deal and says that those imaginary leaders promised me the world, and so now I'm going to implement the MOU. I can't think of any other way that at the moment that it would look different from how you predicted.
That is not an optimistic set of circumstances for the global economy. So we'll have to wait and see how it works. But as always, we are unintimidated and uncompromised to bring the truth, even if with something like this. We're very grateful for you coming on to share how things look from the Iranian side. We are very grateful.
I'm very grateful for being on your show. Thank you.
Thank you very much, folks. And we will see you back at
Pay attention to what BlackRock is doing right now. They're about to completely own Ukraine. More on that part of the story here in a moment. But first, we are in the endgame right now of this war in Ukraine. And we better buckle up, because either we are nearing a moment of total peace, the unconditional surrender of Ukraine to Russia, markets boom around the world with what comes next, investment pours into a shattered Ukraine, sanctions are removed from Russia, energy suddenly returns to Europe, ending their energy crisis. People stop being slaughtered in this senseless NATO proxy war. Or, and this is a big or, we are about to descend into a massive endgame war that obliterates Ukraine. Kiev will be reduced to rubble. Hundreds of thousands will die. And then Russia unleashes the kill shot, taking out Zelensky and what remains of any kind of Ukrainian parliament, as if there's some sort of democracy there. This is the moment we are in right now. And no, it's not hyperbole. Just look at what just happened over the past several days. The mainstream media totally ignored, and what just happened overnight. Russia is launching ballistic missiles at Kiev, and suddenly the Patriot air defense systems are totally silent. Not one interception. Not one. Not one observed launch during multiple attacks. Russia reportedly fired roughly 5 Iskander ballistic missiles at the Ukrainian capital overnight. Every one of them made it through. We can't independently prove that Ukraine has literally exhausted every Patriot interceptor in its inventory. But ask yourself this, if Kiev still has plenty of missiles, why aren't they firing them? Why is Zelensky once again begging the United States and Europe for more Patriot systems? And he keeps blaming the West like it's our fault. Why are there air raid sirens reportedly sounding after some of these missiles have already struck? This is what's happening. This is Kiev, the capital, the most heavily defended city in the entire country. And Russia appears to just be punching right through those defenses with almost no resistance at all. That changes everything. And then just look at the battlefield. Russia says it's taken Konstantinovka, one of the major fortress cities in Ukraine's remaining Donbass defense belt right now. 2 left. Ukraine, of course, disputes that Russia completely controls the city, but nobody disputes the direction of travel right now. Ukraine is losing territory. Its defensive lines are under enormous pressure. Its manpower crisis is getting worse. Its air defenses are being depleted. And in this fortress city, as friend of the show Rick Sanchez pointed out, the amount of body bags that Russia was trying to hand back to Ukraine was turned down.
What is Zelensky doing? He doesn't want people around the world to know that Ukraine has just lost this town, this important city, Konstantinovka. He doesn't want people to know that. So when the Russians just recently, within the last 24 hours, offered to the Ukrainians to pause the battle so that they can come here and retrieve these bodies, these dead soldiers, right, and take them back to their families, apparently Zelensky said, "Niet, no, don't want them."
I mean, what is the Ukrainian government doing? It's grabbing more men off the streets right now in order to throw them into the massive meat grinder. Just look at these scenes. Recruitment officers surrounding men. Here's a guy on a bike, just grabbing him off the bike, forcing him into a vehicle. Families are screaming. Now crowds are fighting back. People smashing police cars. Riots unfolding over the past 48 hours in the town of Lviv. Ukrainians calling Zelensky a mother effer. Stop sending our young men off to die. And Western politicians call this like defending democracy. Really? That's your citizenry telling you they don't want this war anymore. You cancel elections. You shut down opposition parties. You restrict media. You grab men from public streets, send them into the industrial drone war. And we're supposed to call that democracy? Almost all of these men reportedly received like limited preparation before being sent towards one of the most dangerous battlefields on earth. Under 2 weeks of training, we've heard. These aren't soldiers in the eyes of Western sponsors. These are inventory. They're just like another warm body that can be used to keep this war going for another week. That's it. Ukraine is a husk of its former self. Professor John Mearsheimer said it plainly. Listen.
Ukraine has effectively been wrecked. It has already lost a substantial portion of its territory and is likely to lose more land before the fighting stops. Its economy is in tatters with no prospect of recovery in the foreseeable future. And according to my calculations, it has suffered roughly 1 million casualties.
Ukraine has been wrecked, but the people who wrecked it are already positioning themselves right now to profit from the massive rebuilding effort. So think about that. The World Bank, you have the European Commission, the United Nations, and Ukraine estimate reconstruction could cost nearly $600 billion over the next decade. I think that number is low, $600 billion. BlackRock may not become Ukraine's biggest creditor, but it could become something even more important, one of the financial institutions deciding who gets access to Ukraine's reconstruction money, its infrastructure, its energy system, its natural resources. So the IMF, the World Bank, they may hold all the debt, but BlackRock is going to help decide where all of that money goes and who profits from the rebuilding of that country. And of course, all of the shareholders within Vanguard and inside BlackRock who could benefit from these contracts. So that means these contracts for roads, bridges, housing power stations, telecommunications, mines, weapons factories, Patriot missile production, all of it. BlackRock will be there. The World Bank will be there. The IMF will be there. American defense companies will be there. European companies will be there, making all kinds of money. So everyone gets paid except the Ukrainian families burying their sons. And Ukraine will not truly control this rebuilding at all. Ukraine's public debt is already above 200 billion. Billions owed to the IMF, the World Bank, foreign governments. Talk about all of the mineral resources that sit under that country, the copper, the iron ore, everything that's going to enrich all of these foreign governments. So after the war, Ukraine may technically remain a country, but its economy will be controlled by the creditors. Its miners and its minerals will be negotiated away. Its state-owned assets will be prioritized. Its policies will be dictated by the institutions that are holding this debt. And of course, BlackRock will be the umbrella that controls all of it. So first they destroy the country with a proxy war, and then they lend out the money to rebuild it. They collect interest and take control of all of these assets. What a business model, if you can have it, right? But they were planning this for years. And remember, of course, when BlackRock flew in and met with Zelensky, and there was all the big hugging and handshaking. There was multiple camera shoots all featuring this big BlackRock meeting. Yeah, that was even years ago. So right now, and all of the cards are in Putin's hand. Like everyone's, oh, it's Ukraine. No, it's not. They're all in Putin's hand. Putin now faces a historic decision. He can continue this war, endure more drone attacks across Russian cities inside of Russia. Obviously, the Russians that are lined up waiting for gasoline right now because of impact to their Russian oil infrastructure. They could create a closer military cooperation with China, unleash overwhelming force against Kiev, or he can accept a peace settlement, lock in Russia's territorial gains, take control fully of the Donbass, bring an end to this nightmare. Will he? We're hearing, of course, from the Russian side that, as Peskov has said, that this war could end tomorrow if Ukraine simply hands over the Donbass, ends this war. The war would end tomorrow. But will he also face pressure from Russian hardliners inside of the country? Putin. They think he's been far too restrained. They look at Ukraine's attacks inside Russia and ask the same question many people are asking, like, why are the presidential offices and parliament buildings in Kiev still standing? Like, why haven't they bombed them? Why haven't they killed Zelensky at this point? Like, why haven't they leveled all of that infrastructure, the SBU and all of it, that are carrying out these attacks with NATO coordination inside of Russia? So, my friends, this is the final crossroads. This is, I believe, the tipping point moment in this war. So that's the news update part of this video covering what happened over the past 48 hours. Now I want to tell you about today's.
Kofi, follow me.